before we get going with the actual stars, you might notice that around the room here I've placed the names of some constellations. And what I want to do is a very brief introduction to why we see things in the night sky when we do. People will ask about certain constellations, and I might say, oh yeah, we can't see that one right now in the evening. We only see that in the winter, or we only see that in the summer. So I want to briefly kind of go into that. So for this, we're going to imagine that right here in the middle of the room is the sun. Okay, so big bright sun. I will play the role of the Earth. So here I am now on Earth. The sun, I'm facing in towards the sun, which means it is daytime. And the sky is all lit up, and I cannot see any of those constellations over that way because it's daytime. However, if I turn to night, and I'm not going to keep my back to you, but if I turn this way, right, I can see all of those constellations. And that's this, and let's see, this I guess represents sort of late summer. Sagittarius, I think, actually even right now, I think we can still see Sagittarius. So as the year goes on and the Earth orbits the sun, we get to a different position. Now my night sky looks out and I can see a few of these, and now I can't see some of what I used to be able to see. Those now become invisible because the sun is there, the sky is blue, can't see them, right? And as we proceed around the year, as I get over here, now it's sort of the opposite effect. Now I can't see that stuff because the sun's there, it's daytime, but I can see all of this. And so as the Earth is going around the sun, basically our night sky points into different directions, into outer space, into the galaxy, and we see those things in that direction at that time. So with that sort of introduction, hopefully that will explain some of the things that I'll be mentioning when we talk about what's up there and when we see it. Okay, so I think we're ready to go ahead and look at the stars. And so we have, let me get that out of the way for the moment. We have up here a display from a program called Stellarium. Stellarium is a free program that you can get for your computer or phone or tablet. And it is basically a planetarium program. It lets you see what you can set it for any place on the Earth. You can set it for any time of year, and you can see what's visible at that time. You can set it for any year. So folks even use this to go back into the past and try to understand things, such as, for example, at the museum recently, we had a program featuring some of Vincent van Gogh's paintings. And folks actually used Stellarium to go back and figure out at what time, what date and time was he looking at the sky to see the scenes that he depicted in his paintings. So a very, very powerful program and freely available to anybody. So we have here, we're looking toward the north, and we have here one at least thing that probably people recognize, right? We have right there, we've got the Big Dipper. And the Big Dipper, we're looking toward the north. The constellations in the north are a bit of an exception to what I just demonstrated. The constellations in the north we actually see just about we see them all year round. And it may vary a little bit, but for example, you see the Big Dipper is very low in the sky right now, and so you might have something in your way and you can't see it, but technically it's up. So those constellations are what we call circumpolar. If we follow these stars on the Dipper and follow them upwards, we get to another star. That star is the North Star. That is the center of the circle. That is the star that's almost directly over our North Pole. And so as the Earth spins, makes the sky looks like it's moving, it spins around that center. So these constellations in the north move around that center. The Dipper, now let's make a little bit of an adjustment here. This is actually a bad time to see the entire constellation and the names. So you may also know that the Big Dipper has a name associated with it, Ursa Major, the Great Bear. It's not a great time to see it because it's so low. The tail is represented by the handle, the body is there by the bowl, and then there's three more stars, 1, 2, 3, making a very, very pointy head. And what we can't see because it's very low, there are some faint stars that come down below for a couple of legs. So maybe it sort of, kind of, maybe looks like some kind of animal anyway, right? We got a pointy head, a body, a tail, and legs. We use names from the ancient Greeks and Romans for the official constellation names. They had a story about a bear, and so it's the Great Bear, Ursa Major. So now I brought you up to the Little Dipper, right? I brought you up to the, or I should say, I brought you up to the North Star, and around the North Star is the Little Dipper. The Little Dipper is kind of dim compared to the Big Dipper. The handle and the bowl sometimes don't show up very well, and but there's some stars there for a bowl, there's stars there for a handle. And so there's your Little Dipper. Now, what folks were really trying to do back then was not make pretty, realistic pictures. They were trying to make a way to remember and understand the sky. Folks in ancient times had a very important and serious challenge. They had to correctly anticipate the coming of the seasons so that they could do things like plant crops and grow things, especially a lot of things to feed a community. So it was really important. You know, it seems like at this point the weather has maybe caught up with the calendar today, maybe the last couple of days. It actually feels like October, right? And for the last few weeks, it really hasn't felt that way. It's felt a lot warmer. But again, you notice what I said, it feels like the calendar or not. We have our calendar, and we know that if we're sitting in now mid-October, we know that winter is coming at us, and we need to be making preparations for that. And so this was an important thing. You don't want that to sneak up on you, especially when you don't have the technology as folks did not have in ancient times. So it was a very, very important challenge, but they didn't have a calendar like we did. Our calendar matches the seasons. If you say October 15th, you have an idea of what the weather's going to be like. But their calendars didn't do that. They didn't have a way, or at least not in their calendars. But as folks observed and looked at the sky, they found that they did have a way. They had a way up in the sky. They could look at the sky. So, for example, at this time of year, the Big Dipper is really low in the northern sky. Other times of year, later as we get into winter, it'll start kind of being over a little bit more towards the eastern part of the northern sky and kind of going up. In the spring, it's way up overhead in the northern sky, and it's upside down. And then in the summer, it's over toward the western edge, and it makes this huge circle in the sky around or throughout the year. And I'm talking about if you go out roughly an hour and a half after sunset, when it's dark enough to see things. And as if you did that week by week, you would notice the Big Dipper slowly making this progression week after week after week. So folks noticed that, and they came to realize that they could use the sky as their almanac. Well, you got to organize yourself. You got to learn this thing. And so what do? You try to make things easy to remember, and so that you correctly identify them. So now, if we've got a big bear, we got the Big Dipper into a big bear, right? What are we going to do with the Little Dipper that makes sense? Okay? It's going to be a little bear. Now, even if you could see stars for the Little Dipper, I can't show you stars that look like a bear in any way, shape, or form. It just doesn't look like a bear. And most of the constellations are like that. They don't really look like what they're named after. But they have some association, maybe with another constellation, maybe with something happening on Earth at that time of year. It's got some association that helps people remember what they are and what their significance is to them. So that's kind of what the constellations are about. And I'll share with you, some of the stories about that. And let's go ahead and look for we got the two dippers. We're going to look for one other thing a little higher at this time of year, a little higher in the northern sky. We have sort of a M or W shape sideways. This is Cassiopeia. All right, she was a queen, and this is supposed to be her throne right here. She would sit here, and she would lean her back there. And this may not look like a very comfortable throne right now, does it? Right? Because if she's sitting there, leaning there, she's upside down, right? The story about her, and we might get back hopefully to a more extended version of this, she was a very vain and conceited person. She would brag a lot about her beauty. She bragged a lot about her daughter's beauty, which caused a lot of trouble. So the gods eventually got sick of her, and they banished her to this throne, which is upside down half of the time. And that was her punishment. So as the year goes on, this is her upside down time of year, is now in the fall. As this also will go around the northern sky, just as I described for the Big Dipper. And so she is right side up sometimes. And also I should say that should you choose to go out and stay up all night, you'll see some of that progression as well. You won't see the entire progression, but you'll see some of it if you did that. Okay, so there's our northern sky, a few things out there in the northern sky. So what I'd like to do is kind of move around. Let's head out to see what's toward the west. And the western sky is kind of where things are, shall we say, disappearing. We know the sun, we think of the sun, right, goes east to west every day. The stars do the same thing. The stars, the stars that aren't in the north, I should say. The stars that aren't in the north will appear to rise in the east and go and set in the west. And that happens during the night, but it also, again, week by week, as we go through the year, you see something similar. So week by week, if you were to look for some of these, you would see them getting a little lower and a little lower and a little lower and a little lower each day. And eventually, you wouldn't see them again until sometime next year. The one that's up here that shows reasonably well, there's a kind of a lopsided square here. It's not very bright, but if you know what you're looking for, you can spot it. And this lopsided square is the center of Hercules, okay, the great hero Hercules. He had and there's very faint lines that kind of pass for arms and legs coming out of this thing. But it's really, this is also called the keystone of Hercules. And so you might wonder, why does such a great hero have such a dim constellation? Right? It's not that easy to see. And some of it goes back to, some of it is association, and some of it also is that the Greeks didn't make up this stuff. By and large, they inherited things from earlier cultures, from the ancient Sumerians, from the Babylonians who came after them. They inherited those objects. And the spot that we call Hercules was associated with an ancient Sumerian hero. And the Greeks just kind of took that over and gave it their own. They just changed the name, basically, of the hero. So they were aware of these associations from the past, and they would make those kind of like revisions to the legends. Now, let me go ahead, and I'm going to, I've been leaving this off, but let's go ahead and find that. There we go. I'm going to put up, that was Perseus. I've got to click there, and now I can put that up. There we go. There's Hercules. There's Perseus, who's another hero. That's not who I was looking for. Let's see. There we go. I wanted Draco. Whoops, let's get that out of the way. Draco is a dragon. Draco's, the tail is very dim, and it passes right between the two dippers. And the body kind of curls around, and there's the head up there. The head kind of makes a bit of a bit of a trapezoid here. Let's see if we can get rid of those guys for a second. There's a little bit of a sort of a lopsided trapezoid right there. That's the head of that dragon. You notice, though, and again, this is an ancient constellation, goes way back before the Greeks. And you notice Hercules. Now they have him. They've depicted him fighting the Hydra there. Okay, the many-headed Hydra. But they also show him kind of stomping on this dragon. Right? And one of the labors of Hercules, one of the later labors, was to go to this orchard that had golden apples and was guarded by a dragon. And indeed, he defeats the dragon and gets the golden apples. So we see that kind of played out here. And there's another sort of association and another reason maybe why Hercules is where he is. And basically, if you put him somewhere, and then it's like, well, you're stuck with the stars that are there, and they just aren't very bright stars. So what do you do? So this is more the way that constellations came about. People aren't doing connect the dots and making a real pretty picture most of the time, anyway. All right, so there's our western sky. There's Hercules, and let's move around to the south. And as we move to the south, one thing that you can see perhaps is some fuzziness here. Okay, this fuzziness is the Milky Way. The Milky Way is, we are basically looking out into our galaxy, and we're looking in the direction of the center of our galaxy, right in that direction, where most of the stars are. Our galaxy has several hundred billion stars in it, It is in the shape of a flat disc with most of them kind of balled up in the middle with some spirals, so some of the stars spiraling out in these bands. And we're kind of looking across one of those bands and into the center. We are seeing stars that are too far away to see dots. We just see a lot of light coming from all of those stars. So, and it's called the Milky Way. Well, the Greeks had a story about a couple of kids who spilled milk across the sky. And indeed, our word for galaxy and the word for lactose in milk have a similar root. So we have these associations that are just, we don't even remember them anymore, but they do come, a lot of them, from the sky. Now, the one thing that you can see here pretty clearly is I mentioned Sagittarius that we can still see in the sky at this time of year. It's getting very low. It never gets very high in the sky. Now, Sagittarius is the archer in those stories, right? And maybe there's a bow right there and there's an arrow. And maybe this is like the arm or elbow pulling it back, ready to fire. All right, that's going to be as good as it gets, folks. And what's even worse is if you know these stories well, you know that Sagittarius is actually a centaur. I'm not going to make a centaur out of that for you, no way. So, you know, maybe a bow and arrow there and the arm. But there he is, the archer in the sky, and kind of the last vestige of the summer constellations as well. Folks do look at this and see something different. They see, they call it the teapot dome. You have the pot is there, there's the handle, the lid, and what I call the arrow makes the spout. And maybe the Milky Way is the steam coming up out of that kettle. So there it is. There's in the sky. Now, when the lights were on, I forgot to point out that you might have recognized a lot of those names up there around us. But there was maybe one that maybe you didn't recognize, and that one is called Ophiuchus. And let's see if we can find that one, because that's kind of an interesting story. Let's get, okay, so there we go. There's Sagittarius. And let's see, there we go. There is Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Now, you might recognize Sagittarius as one of the zodiac constellations. And if we look, here is what's not on the screen. What's now down below the horizon over to the right of this would have been Scorpius, also a zodiac constellation. And here is Ophiuchus right in the middle of them. By all rights, ought to be the 13th zodiac constellation. However, well, oops, 13, right? So no, he gets left out. But the idea, if you hear about things like sun signs and horoscopes, and some people say, well, yeah, I am a Sagittarius, for example. And so what they think that means is that the sun was in Sagittarius when they were born. However, that may have been true 2,000 years ago. It's not true anymore. The sun may not have been in Sagittarius when they were born. And in fact, depending on what the date is, the sun may very well have been in Ophiuchus. The sun is actually in Ophiuchus more than it is in Scorpio. So anyway, but there he is holding the snake. Let's bring him around a little bit. And this is a bit of an interesting situation because we actually have three constellations here. We have Serpens caput, Serpens cauda, the tail, and Ophiuchus himself. and again holding on to that snake. Well, the ancient Greeks and many cultures, especially cultures close to nature, had a way different idea about snakes than we do. And they looked at snakes, and especially the idea of the snake being able to shed its skin. Right? If you've ever seen a snake after it sheds its skin, it looks brand new and shiny. And folks looked at that and they said, whoa, the snake just made itself new again. It has the secrets of healing and regeneration. And so there he is holding on to the snake, symbolizing his mastery of this. Ophiuchus indeed represents the first doctor. And we remember him today, right? You see an ambulance, you drive by the hospital maybe at your doctor's office on the wall, you see something with the snake wrapped around a stick, right? That is the staff of Ophiuchus and his snake. That is his caduceus. Occasionally, somebody makes a mistake and they do two snakes. It's the caduceus of Mercury or Hermes, all right? And it's a mistake. It's supposed to be for Ophiuchus. But we still kind of remember him today. And that's why you see snakes, because, again, folks had a way different idea about snakes than maybe we do today. So anyway, there's that one. But Ophiuchus is a very dim constellation. I'm not even going to try to show you what it, I can't tell you exactly what to look for. Just if you find Sagittarius, look above and to the right, and you're looking where Ophiuchus is. I think that's the best we can tell you there. All right, so let's go ahead and move into the fall. And let's go ahead and light up a few of these. And the fall, well, first of all, before I do that, before I kind of bring anything in, just looking at this, it's like there's hardly any bright stars, right? There's not very many easily recognizable shapes. And ancient people looked upon this as the ocean. Now, from those really old cultures such as the Sumerians, the Babylonians, to their south they had ocean. And so they had deities associated with the ocean. And so a lot of this area is also associated with the ocean. You might think that, well, you look at you're at a big lake even. It doesn't have to be the ocean, right? You're at a big body of water. You're looking in the water. It's murky. It's hard to see shapes. It's hard to see anything distinctly, right? So a lot of things here have a water or an ocean theme to them. Let's see. Let's grab onto that one. And there we go. So there is Capricorn, the sea goat. All right, half a goat and half fish. Delphinus, the dolphin. And Aquarius, the water bearer, holding a jar of water, right, and pouring a jar of water for the gods. And I will point out, get rid of those for a second, not a star. There's the planet Saturn. So looking to, what is that, the southeast, you look for, it's not a majorly bright thing, but it's the only thing that's of any brightness at all in the southeast sky. So it's pretty easy to spot where that is. So there's Saturn, and let's see no, we don't want that. Let's see, okay, Saturn looks like it's associated with Pisces. There we go. And there's, all right, so there's Pisces there. So you have all this ocean stuff in the sky. We do have one fairly bright set of stars, though, there's a square up in this area. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And that one is Pegasus. Okay, and that's probably the one that you're going to easily find, is Pegasus, the winged horse. All right, so, well, what's going on here? First of all, okay, we were doing good with water stuff until we brought in Pegasus, right? But does anybody know the mythology of Pegasus? Pegasus is the offspring of Poseidon, the god of the oceans. So he is indeed a creature of the water. And the one legend about Pegasus was that he got onto a mountain and he kicked the mountain and a spring came out, right, a gusher of water, right? So he is a creature of the water. So there he is flying up above all the ocean stuff. So again, knowing some of that backstory, it starts to begin to make sense where things are. Actually, in a way, there is a star here in his nose. There's another star by his eye. There are some dim stars to make the neck. And then maybe the square makes the body. So maybe you kind of have the front end of a horse. It's kind of an all right horse, really, for a bunch of spots in the sky. You do, so it is also maybe somewhat realistic. But people were using things, that they knew at the time to do that. One thing, so let's lose that for a second, and let's just have that square, right? So let's think about, we got this big square, right, coming up right now, and actually we've been seeing it since August. Right, and it's getting to be fairly prominent now in October. And so if we were naming this today, right, and we were thinking of something associated with this time of year, we might be calling this the baseball diamond. Okay, maybe like home plate, first base, second base, third base, right? Maybe something like that. Actually, I think if we put home plate up there, and that's the third baseline, there's actually a bright star down there playing a foul ball in the corner. That's what people did. They did name things after what they were familiar with, and maybe that's what we'd have done with it today. Let's get back to some of these. All right, what is going on with a half a goat and a half a fish? Okay. Well, the Greeks in their stories, you may be familiar, you're maybe more familiar with the centaurs, right? But the Greeks also had the half goat, half person characters. And the god Pan was one of them. And the story is that Pan was out one day and was suddenly attacked by a dragon. Pan did something very ungodlike. Pan just turned and ran for his life. Got to a river, dove in, and tried to disguise himself as a fish. Well, he was in such a hurry and he was so scared that, he only got the job part way done. And today, if somebody kind of gets nervous or scared and they rush and they mess things up, we say that they panic, right? They panic. And that word is the disease of Pan. Now, a lot of people say, we call it panic because if you saw Pan, you would panic, right? But one way or another, that does come from him. In the sky, the stars make they make this sort of wedge shape, and the wedge shape, that's a little sideways right now. But for the wedge shape, could you imagine maybe a boat with a deep keel, like a sailboat, right? So here's the boat. Maybe the water line is there. A lot of this is underwater. Again, it's got a deep keel. And, we don't have anything for a sail. Again, in the ancient in the Sumerians, they had, again, a deity of the oceans down there to their south called Ea, E-A. Ea had a boat. And on the boat, on the bow of that boat, was like a figurehead, a decoration. And what was that decoration? It was a goat. So has there been a multi-thousand-year game of telephone going on here that turned that goat on that boat into the goatfish? Who knows? I have not seen anything, anybody, really making that speculation very seriously, but one has to wonder. They do if you look at the Sumerians and if you look at the art around Ea, there are a lot of half-fish people. Okay, so it's not too hard to imagine maybe you don't put half a goat somewhere too. All right, so anyway, there's your goatfish. There's your Capricorn. The dolphin has maybe a little more straightforward of a story. All right, Delphinus. All right, and if we go back to the times of the Greeks, of course, things were very different 2,000 years ago. A lot of things they didn't have, but there are some things they did have that we do today, like concerts. People like to go listen to their music, except they had to actually go. And so one of the great singers of the day was named Arion, who he would go around from city to city giving concerts and getting paid for it. Now, the other thing different, we didn't have highways, we didn't have a lot of overland travel. Arion went from city to city by boat. So he finishes up a concert, he's on the boat on his way to the next gig, and the sailors on this boat realize, hey, this is Arion. He gets big money for these concerts. He's got to have that money with him, right? So they decided they're going to just dump him overboard and keep the money. So they drag him up on deck, and he begs to play one last song, and he does. And it's a beautiful song, and the creatures of the ocean begin to come around and listen. They toss him off the boat, and one of the creatures listening was this dolphin Arion. Arion comes up, Delphinus comes up, takes Arion on his back, and off they go. And he's a fast dolphin. They made it to shore before the boat did. Arion gets in, he reports what happens, and when the boat does come in, all the sailors are arrested. So Delphinus is a bit of a hero, and he gets a place of honor up in the sky. And I like to say that it wasn't not an accident that got Arion home. He got home on purpose. All right, and don't worry, that's the last of those. And I guess in this, two fish tied together. What's up with that, right? What's up with that? Well, what's up with that is this actually represents another goddess in trouble, a goddess this time, with her child, and they were also became in danger, and they decided to disguise themselves as fish and tie themselves together so they wouldn't get separated. And there they are. And I think there's one place I think where folks think that maybe these fish still are, and they're very careful about the fish that they catch from that area. So there we go. There's and we've now come back around. And what I'd like to do now is bring in, Cassiopeia. Okay, so there she is. There she is looking in the mirror. All right, so there we go. We've got our queen, right? We've got a queen in the sky. Well, what else are we going to put there, right? Maybe a king. All right, and where are you going to put the king? Well, you're going to put the king pretty much next to the queen somehow, right? So you look around, well, there's not too many stars, but there's some stars. Hello? There we go. Let's make a king. All right, and there he is. His name is Cepheus. They had a daughter. Okay, where's she going to go? She needs to go near mom and dad, right? Well, we're running out of stars. That's about all that's left. There she is. Okay, and you notice that she's in chains and looking rather bedraggled. And, well, again, I mentioned her mother, right? Brags a lot. And Cassiopeia brags about her daughter Andromeda, brags how beautiful she is, and then goes on to say that Andromeda is more beautiful than the daughters of the gods. Now, Poseidon had beautiful daughters. He was furious. He sends a huge sea monster to attack the kingdom. And so they try to hide Andromeda. The monster is just starting to destroy things and making life miserable and awful for the people of the kingdom. Well, Cepheus realized, he has to take care of his people too. He can't just worry about his daughter. So he goes to the temple of Delphi, and he finds out the only way he's going to get the monster off his back and off of his kingdom's back is to let the monster have Andromeda. So very reluctantly, he has her chained to the ocean, to the rocks by the ocean, and leaves her there for the monster. Well, okay, saw him a bit before. We've got a hero. His name is Perseus. And you probably know of Perseus in connection with a different adventure, right? Which is the slaying of the Medusa. And actually, they picture him here holding the head of the Medusa. The particular star, or the bright star where the Medusa is a very fascinating star. It's called Algol. And Algol, I want to be careful how I word this, because Algol changes in brightness. That actually is not unusual. A lot of stars change in brightness. What's unusual for Algol is that it's fairly bright and it changes fairly drastically, so that it's very noticeable. It's probably the most noticeable of the variable stars. And so every couple of days, Algol suddenly gets very dim, and then it gets brighter again. Now, folks in ancient times were used to looking up there at the sky and having things be constant, right? You can count on them being there. After all, you're trying to tell the seasons with them, right? And so the idea of this thing changing was very unsettling. They call Algol is the demon star, and maybe a very fitting star to become the head of the Medusa. So Perseus is on his way home from killing the Medusa. He's passing through a kingdom he's never been in before. He's traveling along the coast, and it's a beautiful morning. Now, he was sent to kill the Medusa by the king where he was living, and the king was very jealous and maybe a little afraid of Perseus' great warrior. He fantastic warrior. So the king had sent him on what was supposed to be an impossible task: bring back the head of the Medusa. Well, Perseus does it. He's on his way home with the head. He's going to show that king a thing or two. And so he's there traveling along the coast. It's a beautiful morning. The waves are crashing on the rocks. There's a girl chained to the rocks. Yeah, he found Andromeda. And he rescues Andromeda, and they end up getting married. So there he is. He's right next to his mother-in-law now. Okay, so there they are in the sky. So again, this is one of the best examples of sort of Perseus, I don't know, maybe it sort of looks like a helmet there. Let's get rid of that for a second. Maybe it kind of looks like a helmet, maybe right about here with some arms. That's as good as that's going to get. But generally these things, that Andromeda, that doesn't look like anything, the queen, okay, yeah, kind of looked like her throne. Cepheus kind of looks like a doghouse. So I don't know, maybe he was in the doghouse a lot. But basically, right. But you bring it all together in this story, and it helps people remember what things are where, and help them remember what's up there in the sky. Now, I'm going to finish up with I'm going to come back to the Big Dipper for a moment. And the reason is I mentioned this idea of people looking upon the sky as being constant and unchanging. And when there's something that varies from that, like a star that changes, right, that gets them very unsettled. The other thing that got them really nervous was things suddenly showing up. These things called comets, right? As they would come in close to the solar system, all of a sudden there'd be a comet there that wasn't there before. And the reason why it came back is that right now, I believe right at this time, it's early in the morning, you're going to need a really clear northeastern horizon. There is the possibility that there is a comet there, okay, and there is a possibility that that comet may become dimly visible to the unaided eye, and certainly to the eye that is aided by binoculars. Right, so might be something to go out and look for. Maybe you might be hearing about that at some point on news or anything like that. So I thought I'd let you know. And now what I'd like to do is did anybody come in with any questions? Any questions about what I've shown you today? I could tell.
Comets move, right?
So the comets move. So the question is, do comets move? Yes, they do. They do orbit. And so actually it's not going to be there for long. Okay, and it's not going to be exactly in the same place under the Dipper. It is going to appear to slowly drift along. And then it will go too far and it will just fade out of sight. So they do orbit. However, they orbit in a way that's very different. The planets pretty much orbit in a flat plane. If the Earth is here, if the Earth is on this plane here, it's like Jupiter isn't like way up there somewhere. Jupiter's pretty much on the same plane just about. And the same with all the planets except, well, the dwarf planet, Pluto, that's a little odd. But the comets, they come in from these very steep angles compared to the rest to the planets. And so,
Do they last for eons?
So comets do last for eons. Some of the comets, they think, take tens of thousands of years to orbit the sun. So some of these ones that we've seen in the past will not be seen again for millennia. Sometimes they get close to the sun and they break up and they get destroyed. In the 1990s, one of them crashed into Jupiter.
How big are they?
And a comet is on the order of 10-ish miles, 10 miles, maybe 20. So that's that sort of size. So they're not very big, but they're made of a lot of what astronomers call ice, which actually could be frozen carbon dioxide, it could be frozen methane, frozen other types of things besides water, and then and sort of just a lot of dirt. And as they get close to the sun energizes and creates that tail that we see on the comet. So. That's why we see them have tails. The solar system isn't always the same, or the sky isn't always the same. And then just to get to the point I was going to make, when people saw that, comets were an omen of disaster. They were often associated with maybe the death of a king or something like that. They were not welcome sights at all. So yeah. So anyway, good luck. Maybe maybe you'll find that. But you know what? Just get out. Actually, in the morning sky, you also can see Jupiter. And I showed you Saturn in the evening sky, right? In the morning sky, you can see Jupiter and Venus over toward the east. So a couple of really bright things, especially Venus. You won't mistake it for anything else. So that could be worth it. Anybody?
I'm going to stop you there,
Okay.
but thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming in. And
Thank you.
anybody